My name is Sophia Bennett, and I'm 24 years old. On what should have been the proudest day of my life, graduating summa cum laude with acceptance to medical school, I watched my father drop something white into my champagne glass. My parents smiled at me with fake love while planning to drug me at my own graduation party. In that split second, I made a decision that would expose my family's darkest secret. I smiled back, casually switched my glass with my sister Madison's, and watched their entire plan collapse in front of 50 family members and friends. Before we dive into this shocking family betrayal, I'd love to know where you're watching from, and if you've ever suspected your own family of sabotaging your success. Please hit that like button if you're ready for a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Don't forget to subscribe, because this tale of graduation day revenge will show you exactly what happens when parents choose favorites. Growing up as Sophia Bennett in our picture-perfect Connecticut home was like living in a beautifully decorated prison. From the outside, we looked like the American dream family. My father, Robert, was a successful corporate lawyer. With his own firm, my mother, Patricia, was the kind of socialite who organized charity galas and served on museum boards, and our colonial-style house in an exclusive neighborhood screamed success and respectability. But inside our perfect home, there was an invisible hierarchy that determined everything. At the top sat my sister Madison, 2 years younger than me, but infinitely more valuable in my parents' eyes. She had inherited our mother's blonde hair and blue eyes, along with an effortless charm that made adults melt and peers worship her. Everything came naturally to Madison's social situations, getting what she wanted, and most importantly, our parents' unconditional love and support. I, on the other hand, was the dark-haired, serious daughter who preferred books to parties and academic achievement to social climbing. While Madison spent her weekends at country club events and exclusive parties, I was in my room studying or volunteering at the local hospital, dreaming of becoming a doctor and helping people who couldn't afford the kind of medical care our family took for granted. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Madison turned 16, our parents threw her a lavish party and surprised her with a brand-new BMW convertible. When I turned 16 2 years earlier, they gave me a used Honda Civic and told me I should be grateful for reliable transportation. Madison's closet was filled with designer clothes from shopping trips to New York and Paris, while I shopped at department stores with money I earned from my part-time job at the local bookstore. College selection revealed the depth of their bias. When Madison barely graduated high school with a 2.7 GPA, our parents hired expensive tutors and admissions consultants to get her into any decent school. When I earned a full academic scholarship to Columbia University, they seemed almost disappointed that I wouldn't need their financial support. They had hoped I would choose a local state school so I could stay close to home and help with family obligations. My decision to major in pre-med instead of following my father into law created a permanent rift in our relationship. Robert Bennett had built his successful practice with the dream that both his daughters would join him someday, creating a family legal dynasty. When I chose medicine over law, he took it as a personal rejection of everything he had worked to build for our family. Throughout college, I maintained my 4.0 GPA while working part-time jobs to pay for expenses my scholarship didn't cover. Madison, meanwhile, was struggling to maintain her grades at a community college where our parents had enrolled her after she failed to get into any 4-year universities, despite their expensive efforts and connections. Every family gathering became a performance where our parents praised Madison's potential and artistic soul while treating my academic achievements like lucky accidents that didn't reflect any real talent or hard work. When I made Dean's List every semester, they would mention it briefly before launching into detailed discussions about Madison's latest creative project or social triumph. The subtle psychological warfare was constant and exhausting. They would say things like, "Sophia, you're so lucky to be naturally academic. Not everyone has to work as hard as Madison does," implying that my success was effortless, while Madison's struggles were more admirable because they required effort. They never acknowledged the countless hours I spent studying, the sleep I lost, preparing for exams, or the social events I missed to maintain my perfect grades. By my senior year at Columbia, I had learned to expect nothing from my parents beyond basic financial support and token acknowledgement of my achievements. But I had also grown stronger and more independent, building relationships with professors and mentors who valued my intelligence and dedication. Dr. Harrison, a family friend and respected physician, had been encouraging my medical career aspirations and helping me prepare for the competitive medical school admissions process. When my acceptance letter to Johns Hopkins Medical School arrived, I felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride because I had achieved my dream through my own hard work and determination. Sadness because I knew my parents would find a way to make this achievement about them, or worse, about how it affected Madison's fragile self-esteem. Graduation day morning started exactly as I had expected. While I was getting ready in my cap and gown, preparing for one of the most important days of my life, my parents were downstairs discussing party logistics and guest seating arrangements, as if this were just another social event, rather than the culmination of 4 years of academic excellence. At breakfast, Madison complained loudly about having to wake up early for my graduation ceremony, while our parents sympathized with her sacrifice in attending. When I mentioned that I was nervous about my valedictorian speech, my father barely looked up from his newspaper to grunt acknowledgement. The contrast was stark and painful, but I had learned to manage my expectations when it came to parental support. The graduation ceremony itself was beautiful and moving. Walking across that stage to receive my diploma summa cum laude felt like validation for every late night, studying every social event. I had missed every moment. I had chosen academic excellence over easier paths. Dr. Harrison and his wife cheered loudly from the audience, and I could see genuine pride and excitement in their faces, even if I couldn't find the same enthusiasm from my own family. After the ceremony, our house began filling with extended family members who had come to celebrate what my parents were calling both daughters' educational achievements. The phrasing irritated me because Madison had barely managed to complete 2 years of community college with minimal grades, but I bit my tongue and focused on enjoying the day with relatives who seemed genuinely proud of my accomplishments. Aunt Carol, my father's sister, pulled me aside to congratulate me privately on the medical school acceptance and to tell me how proud she was of my dedication and hard work. Uncle James, who was also a lawyer like my father, expressed disappointment that I wasn't following the family legal tradition, but admitted that medicine was a noble calling that suited my personality perfectly. My grandparents were thrilled about my achievements and kept introducing me to other guests as our granddaughter, the future doctor. Their genuine excitement and pride felt like a warm balm against the cold indifference I felt from my immediate family. They asked detailed questions about my medical school plans and seemed genuinely interested in my career aspirations. But even during these positive interactions, I could sense underlying tension from my parents. They would interrupt conversations about my medical career to redirect attention to Madison's artistic talents and her plans to study graphic design at the State University. The constant need to balance attention between their daughters, even on what should have been my special day, felt exhausting and demeaning. The most painful moment came when my acceptance letter to Johns Hopkins arrived in the afternoon mail, just as the party was getting into full swing. I had been expecting this letter for weeks, and opening it in front of family felt like the perfect culmination of my graduation celebration. The thick envelope contained not just acceptance, but also information about a partial scholarship I had earned based on my academic record. My parents' reaction to this incredible news was lukewarm at best. They offered polite congratulations while immediately expressing concerns about the distance from home and the demanding nature of medical school. Within minutes, they had shifted conversation to Madison's acceptance at the state university, treating her admission to a school with minimal entrance requirements as equivalent to my acceptance at one of the nation's top medical programs. Dr. Harrison, who had been watching this family dynamic throughout the party, approached me with genuine excitement about my medical school acceptance. He spent 20 minutes discussing the prestige of Johns Hopkins, the opportunities it would provide, and his willingness to serve as a mentor during my medical education. His enthusiasm felt like everything I had hoped to receive from my own parents. But I noticed that my parents seemed uncomfortable with Dr. Harrison's praise and attention. They would interrupt our conversations or redirect him toward other guests, as if they were threatened by his genuine support for my career aspirations. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. They were actively working to minimize my achievements, even at my own graduation party. As the afternoon progressed and more guests arrived, I began to notice strange behavior from my parents. They kept insisting that I should drink the special champagne they had prepared for the occasion, and they seemed unusually focused on making sure I consumed alcohol at a family gathering where I typically avoided drinking. My father's nervous energy was palpable. He kept checking his watch, making trips to the kitchen, and having whispered conversations with my mother that stopped abruptly whenever I approached. My mother's smiles felt forced and artificial, lacking the genuine warmth she typically displayed at social gatherings where she was in her element as the perfect hostess. Something was wrong, but I couldn't identify exactly what it was. All I knew was that my instincts were telling me to be cautious and alert, even though I was surrounded by family and friends who should have made me feel safe and celebrated. The party was in full swing, with about 50 guests scattered throughout our backyard garden and spilling into the house. The late spring weather was perfect, with warm sunshine and a gentle breeze that made our landscaped yard look like something from a magazine. Tables draped in white linens held elaborate floral arrangements, and a catering staff moved efficiently through the crowd, serving appetizers and refilling drinks. I had just returned from using the bathroom upstairs and was walking toward the kitchen entrance to rejoin the party when I saw something that stopped me cold. Through the dining room doorway, I had a clear view of my father, Robert, standing at the sideboard where the champagne glasses were arranged on a silver tray. He was looking around nervously to make sure no one was watching, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. My heart started racing as I watched him carefully open the envelope and pour white powder into one of the champagne flutes. The powder dissolved quickly, leaving no visible trace in the golden liquid. I pressed myself against the kitchen doorframe, hidden from view, but able to hear my parents' hushed conversation. My mother, Patricia, approached him and asked quietly, "Did you use the right amount?" My father nodded and replied, "Dr. Chen said 2 capsules would make her drowsy and compliant without being dangerous. This will solve our Madison problem and keep Sophia grounded where she belongs." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own parents were planning to drug me at my graduation party. The realization was so shocking and horrifying that for a moment, I couldn't process what I was witnessing. These were the people who had raised me, who were supposed to protect me, and they were actively planning to harm me to prevent me from pursuing my dreams. But my shock quickly transformed into clarity and determination. I had caught them in the act, and I had the opportunity to turn their plan against them. The champagne glasses were arranged on a silver tray in a specific pattern, and I could clearly see which one contained the drug. More importantly, I knew exactly how to make sure the right person ended up drinking it. I took a deep breath, composed my expression into a smile, and walked casually into the dining room as if I had seen nothing unusual. "Mom, Dad, thank you so much for organizing this beautiful party," I said warmly, giving each of them a hug. "I feel so lucky to have parents who care about my success and want to celebrate with our whole family." Their relief was obvious and disgusting. They thought their plan was working perfectly, that their loving daughter had no idea what they had just done to her. My father's satisfied smile made my skin crawl, but I maintained my grateful, innocent expression while my mind raced through the logistics of what I needed to do next. The champagne glasses were positioned so that mine was slightly closer to the front of the tray, making it easy for my parents to ensure I would take the spiked drink. But Madison, true to her selfish nature, always grabbed for the best of everything, without paying attention to what was intended for whom. All I needed to do was create an opportunity for her to take the wrong glass. I approached the tray and carefully noted the exact position of each glass. Then, in one smooth motion that looked completely natural, I picked up Madison's intended glass while simultaneously shifting the spiked glass into the position where Madison would naturally reach. The switch took less than 3 seconds and appeared to be nothing more than me selecting a drink and slightly adjusting the arrangement. My parents watched this exchange with satisfaction, believing I had just picked up the drugged champagne. My father actually nodded approvingly, thinking his plan was proceeding perfectly. The level of their deception and the casualness with which they were willing to harm their own daughter was breathtaking in its cruelty. I held the safe glass and moved closer to where Madison was holding court near the garden fountain, surrounded by cousins and family friends who were hanging on her every word about her college plans and social adventures. She looked beautiful and confident in her flowing sundress, completely unaware that her parents had just tried to drug her sister and that she was about to become an unintended victim of their scheme. The irony was perfect and terrible. Madison, who had always taken everything that was meant for me, was about to take one more thing that would finally reveal the truth about our family to everyone who mattered. My father, Robert, called for everyone's attention from the garden's stone patio, tapping his champagne flute with a silver knife to gather the crowd. The 50 or so guests gradually quieted their conversations and turned toward him, creating the kind of attentive audience he loved as a successful attorney who enjoyed being the center of attention at social gatherings. "Friends and family," he began with his practiced courtroom voice. "Patricia and I are so grateful you could join us today to celebrate both of our daughters' bright futures. Sophia's graduation from Columbia and acceptance to medical school, and Madison's upcoming transfer to State University to study graphic design. We couldn't be prouder of both girls and their unique talents." As he spoke, I watched Madison reach for the champagne tray with her characteristic entitlement, automatically selecting what appeared to be the best-positioned glass. She had no idea she was taking the one my father had spiked with sedatives, just as she had taken countless other things throughout our lives that were originally intended for me. I raised my own safe glass and took a small fake sip while keeping my eyes on Madison. She drank deeply from her champagne, enjoying the expensive French vintage our parents had selected for this special occasion. The irony of the moment was almost overwhelming. My parents' golden child was consuming the drug they had intended for me while I watched their carefully laid plan begin to unravel in real time. For the first 10 minutes after the toast, everything seemed normal. Madison chatted animatedly with our cousin Jennifer about her summer plans, gossiped with Aunt Carol about mutual friends, and held court near the fountain with her typical social grace and charm. She was in her element at family gatherings, naturally drawing attention and admiration from relatives who found her bubbly personality irresistible. But then I began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. Her laughter became louder and more frequent, even at comments that weren't particularly funny. Her gestures became more animated and exaggerated, and she started interrupting conversations with random observations that didn't quite fit the flow of discussion. Uncle James was the first family member to comment on her condition. "Madison seems to be in particularly festive spirits today," he said to my mother with a slight smile. "She's certainly enjoying the celebration." My mother's response was strained and nervous as she watched her favorite daughter's behavior becoming increasingly unpredictable. The changes accelerated rapidly after that. Madison's speech began slurring slightly, though she seemed unaware of the change. Her movements became less coordinated, and she started swaying slightly as she stood talking to groups of relatives. What was most alarming was the complete loss of her usual social filter. She began making inappropriately personal comments about family members' appearances, relationships, and private matters. When Great Aunt Ruth complimented her dress, Madison responded loudly, "Thanks, but honestly, I think Sophia looks like a boring librarian in that graduation outfit. She has no sense of style and never has. It's embarrassing being related to someone so frumpy and uptight." The comment shocked everyone within earshot and created an uncomfortable silence around the fountain area. My parents were beginning to panic. I could see them exchanging increasingly worried glances across the garden and having urgent whispered conversations whenever they thought no one was looking. Their plan had been to drug me into compliance, not to turn their perfect daughter into a social disaster in front of our entire extended family. Dr. Harrison, with his medical training, was among the first to recognize that something was seriously wrong with Madison's condition. He approached her with professional concern, noting her dilated pupils' unsteady movements and dramatic personality change. "Madison, honey, are you feeling all right? You seem a bit off today," he said gently, while subtly checking her pulse and coordination. Madison's response was both revealing and devastating. "I feel amazing, Dr. Harrison. Actually, I feel so good that I think I should tell everyone some truths about this perfect Bennett family. Did you know my parents have been paying people to do my homework for years, and that they hired someone to take my SATs because I'm too stupid to get into college on my own?" The admission sent shockwaves through the gathered relatives. Educational fraud wasn't just embarrassing, it was illegal, and my father's legal career could be seriously damaged by association with such activities. My parents looked horrified as their carefully constructed family image began crumbling in front of everyone who mattered to their social and professional standing. But Madison was just getting started with her drugged confessions. Madison's condition deteriorated rapidly as the sedative my father had intended for me took full effect. What started as inappropriate comments soon escalated into shocking revelations that exposed decades of lies and deception my parents had carefully hidden from our extended family and social circle. Standing near the garden fountain with about 20 relatives gathered around her, Madison launched into increasingly damaging admissions. "You want to know the real truth about our perfect family?" she slurred, swaying dangerously close to the stone edge. "Everything about my education is fake. Mom and Dad hired people to write my papers, take my tests, and even forge my transcripts to get me into college." Grandfather William, the family patriarch, and a retired federal judge stepped forward with grave concern. "Madison, what exactly are you saying about your parents' involvement in educational fraud?" His legal background made him immediately understand the serious implications of her admissions, both legally and ethically, for my father's law practice. My cousin Jennifer tried to intervene, suggesting that Madison might be sick and should go inside to rest. But Madison brushed off her concerns and continued her revelations with the kind of brutal honesty that only comes from complete loss of inhibition. Sick. I'm not sick. I'm finally free to tell the truth. Do you know how much money Dad has stolen from his law firm to pay for my lifestyle? The financial confession hit like a bombshell. Uncle James, who worked in financial consulting, immediately recognized the implications of embezzlement from a law practice. "Robert," he said sharply to my father, "we need to have a private conversation about what Madison is claiming right now." But Madison overheard and laughed bitterly. Private conversation. Why should anything be private anymore? Dad has been stealing money from his clients' trust funds for 3 years to pay for my shopping trips, my car, my fake college applications, and everything else that makes me the perfect daughter everyone thinks I am. My mother, Patricia, tried desperately to control the situation. "Madison, sweetheart, you're not feeling well. You're saying things that aren't true, and you're going to regret these comments tomorrow when you're feeling better." But her attempt at damage control only made Madison more defiant and revealing. "Not true, Mom. You were there when we met with the person who took my SATs. You drove me to the meetings with the essay writers. You helped Dad figure out which accounts to steal from so no one would notice right away." Madison's voice was getting louder and more slurred, drawing the attention of every guest in the backyard. Dr. Harrison stepped in with medical authority. "This young woman has clearly ingested some kind of substance that's affecting her judgment and motor control. She needs immediate medical evaluation, and frankly, some of these admissions suggest she may have been the victim of drugging without her knowledge." His words created a moment of terrifying clarity for my parents. They realized that Dr. Harrison's medical expertise had identified exactly what they had done, and that their attempt to drug me had instead created a situation where their beloved Madison was confessing to criminal activities while obviously under the influence of substances. Madison's personal revelations became even more damaging as she lost all sense of social boundaries. She began describing affairs she had conducted with married men in our community, including the husband of one of my mother's best friends, who was standing right there listening to every word. The betrayals were deeply personal and socially devastating for everyone involved. And speaking of secrets, Madison continued, completely oblivious to the horror on everyone's faces. "Should I tell everyone about Dad's real plan for today? He was supposed to drug Sophia so she would be too messed up to go to medical school. They think she's getting too independent and successful, so they wanted to keep her drugged and compliant at home." And this revelation was the final straw for several family members. Grandfather William demanded an immediate explanation from my parents, while Dr. Harrison insisted that Madison needed emergency medical attention and that the police should be called to investigate the drugging incident. My parents' desperate attempts to get Madison inside the house and away from the crowd were met with resistance from family members who now understood that something criminal had occurred. Uncle James positioned himself between my parents and Madison, while Aunt Carol started taking notes on everything Madison was saying for potential legal proceedings. Madison's physical condition was becoming genuinely dangerous. The combination of the sedative and her increased agitation was causing coordination problems that made her unsteady on her feet. When she tried to gesture dramatically while describing another family secret, she lost her balance and nearly fell into the fountain. Dr. Harrison caught her arm and steadied her while checking her pupils and pulse. "This young woman needs to be in a hospital immediately. She's been given a significant amount of some kind of sedative, and her vital signs are concerning. I'm calling an ambulance right now, and I strongly suggest that someone contact the police about this obvious drugging incident." As Dr. Harrison pulled out his phone to call for medical help, Madison made one final devastating confession that sealed my parents' fate. "The funniest part," she said with a bitter laugh, "is that I switched glasses with Sophia earlier because hers looked better. So all of Dad's careful planning to drug the wrong daughter ended up drugging me instead. Karma is so weird, isn't it?" The admission that she had unknowingly switched our glasses, combined with my father's obvious panic and my mother's desperate attempts at damage control, made it clear to everyone present that my parents had indeed attempted to drug me at my own graduation party. The betrayal was so shocking and cruel that several relatives began crying, while others demanded immediate answers about why parents would try to harm their own child. That's when I quietly approached Dr. Harrison and told him exactly what I had witnessed in the dining room before the party began. The emergency room at Fairfield County Hospital was buzzing with controlled chaos when the ambulance arrived with Madison followed by a convoy of family cars. Dr. Harrison had insisted on riding in the ambulance to monitor Madison's condition while I provided a detailed statement to the paramedics about what I had witnessed my father doing to the champagne. Detective Maria Santos met us at the hospital to investigate the drugging incident. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor who immediately understood the severity of what had occurred. I provided her with a complete account of seeing my father drop white powder into my champagne glass, overhearing their conversation about keeping me grounded, and my decision to switch glasses with Madison. The toxicology results confirmed everyone's worst fears. Madison's blood showed significant levels of lorazepam, a powerful sedative that could have been dangerous or even fatal if combined with alcohol or taken by someone with certain medical conditions. The amount in her system was consistent with what Dr. Harrison estimated would have been intended to make someone drowsy and compliant for several hours. Based on my testimony, the physical evidence, and Madison's recorded admissions about the planned drugging, Detective Santos arrested both of my parents on charges of assault with intent to administer a noxious substance conspiracy to commit assault and endangering the welfare of a child. The charges were serious enough to result in significant prison time if they were convicted. My father's law firm was immediately notified of his arrest, and an emergency meeting was called to discuss the implications of the criminal charges and Madison's public admissions about embezzlement. The partners were horrified to learn that client trust funds might have been compromised, and they began an immediate audit of all accounts Robert had managed. The ripple effects through our community were swift and devastating. My mother's social standing evaporated overnight as news of the drugging incident and financial crimes spread through our exclusive neighborhood and country club. Friends who had admired our family's success and stability now viewed us as a cautionary tale about the darkness that could hide behind perfect facades. Madison's recovery was physically complete within 24 hours, but the emotional and social consequences were just beginning. Her admissions about educational fraud had been recorded by several family members, and the university she was supposed to attend launched an immediate investigation into her application materials and transcripts. The academic investigation revealed the extent of my parents' deception on Madison's behalf. Forged transcripts, paid essay writers, and a proxy test taker had all been used to create a false academic record that bore no resemblance to Madison's actual capabilities or achievements. Her acceptance to State University was immediately revoked, and she faced potential criminal charges for fraud. Dr. Harrison served as my advocate throughout the legal proceedings, ensuring that my medical school acceptance remained secure and that Johns Hopkins was fully informed about the family situation. The medical school administration was actually impressed by my handling of the crisis and my decision to protect myself while ensuring my sister received necessary medical care. Grandfather William, disgusted by his son's behavior and concerned about the family's reputation, immediately offered to pay for my medical school expenses and provide any other support I needed to pursue my career. His gesture meant everything to me, representing the kind of unconditional family love and support I had never received from my parents. The extended family rallied around me in ways that were both surprising and healing. Aunt Carol organized a fund to help with my living expenses during medical school, while Uncle James offered legal assistance in dealing with the aftermath of my parents' crimes. Their support made it clear that not all family relationships were based on manipulation and control. My parents' attempts to reconcile with me from jail were pathetic and self-serving. They claimed they had been trying to protect me from the stress of medical school, and that their actions were motivated by love rather than control. Their inability to acknowledge the severity of their betrayal made it clear that reconciliation would be impossible. Madison's relationship with me was more complex. As the sedative wore off, and she realized what had happened, she experienced genuine remorse for the first time in her life. She began to understand how our parents' favoritism and protection had actually harmed her by preventing her from developing real skills and character. The legal proceedings moved quickly due to the overwhelming evidence and my parents' desire to avoid a public trial. They accepted a plea agreement that included probation, community service, restitution for the embezzled funds, and mandatory counseling. My father was disbarred and lost his law practice, while my mother faced social ostracism from every organization she had previously dominated. The house where I had grown up was sold to pay legal fees and restitution, forcing my parents to move to a small apartment in a less prestigious part of town. The reversal of their fortunes was swift and complete, but I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. I simply felt free from their control and manipulation for the first time in my adult life. Moving away from my family home and starting fresh felt like emerging from a cave into sunlight. With Grandfather William's financial support and emotional encouragement, I was able to focus entirely on preparing for medical school without the constant stress and negativity that had characterized my relationship with my parents. Dr. Harrison had arranged for me to work as a research assistant in his practice during the summer, before medical school started giving me valuable experience and helping me build confidence in my chosen field. Every day reinforced my certainty that medicine was my true calling, and that my parents' attempts to sabotage my career had been motivated by their own psychological problems, rather than any legitimate concern for my well-being. The therapy sessions Dr. Harrison recommended were transformative in helping me understand the dynamics that had shaped my childhood and adolescence. Working with Dr. Rachel Chen, a specialist in family trauma, I began to recognize patterns of emotional manipulation and control that I had normalized because they were all I had ever known. Dr. Chen helped me understand that my drive to achieve academic excellence had been partially motivated by a desperate attempt to earn love and approval that was never actually available from my parents. They had used my accomplishments as social status symbols, while simultaneously resenting my independence and success because it threatened their control over my life. The revelation that my parents had been willing to drug me to prevent my medical career was the ultimate proof that their love had always been conditional and selfish. They didn't want what was best for me. They wanted what was most convenient for their own emotional needs and social image. My relationship with Madison evolved dramatically over the months following our parents' arrest. For the first time in her life, she was forced to face reality without parental protection and financial support. The experience was initially devastating, but ultimately transformative as she began developing genuine skills and work ethic. Madison enrolled in community college courses that she actually had to complete herself, got a job at a local retail store, and started attending counseling to address the psychological damage caused by our parents' favoritism and overprotection. Watching her grow into a more honest and self-reliant person was one of the few positive outcomes of our family's dramatic collapse. Our conversations became more authentic and meaningful as we both processed the trauma of our upbringing and the shock of discovering our parents' true nature. Madison apologized repeatedly for her behavior over the years, acknowledging that she had been aware of the favoritism, but had chosen to benefit from it rather than challenge it. The extended family support system that emerged after the crisis was stronger and more genuine than anything we had experienced before. Grandfather William became a true mentor and father figure, offering wisdom and guidance without the manipulation and control that had characterized our parents' involvement in our lives. Aunt Carol and Uncle James included me in family gatherings and holidays, creating a sense of belonging and acceptance that had been missing from my childhood. Their children, my cousins, became like siblings to me as we built relationships based on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than competition for parental approval. Starting medical school at Johns Hopkins felt like entering a world where my intelligence and dedication were valued and encouraged, rather than seen as threats to family stability. My classmates and professors appreciated the qualities that my parents had tried to suppress, and I thrived in an environment that rewarded hard work and intellectual curiosity. The criminal case against my parents was resolved without a trial, but the civil consequences continued for months. The law firm they had built was dissolved, clients sued for malpractice and theft, and their professional reputations were permanently destroyed. The financial and social penalties were severe, but I felt they were appropriate consequences for their actions. My parents made several attempts to re-establish contact with me during my first year of medical school, but their communications showed no genuine remorse or understanding of the harm they had caused. They continued to frame their actions as misguided attempts to protect me, refusing to acknowledge the selfish motivations behind their plan to drug me. Dr. Chen helped me understand that maintaining no contact with my parents was not cruel or vindictive, but rather a necessary boundary to protect my own mental health and continued growth. Some relationships, even family relationships, become too toxic to maintain, regardless of blood connections or social expectations. By the end of my first year of medical school, I had achieved a level of peace and self-acceptance that would have been impossible while living under my parents' control and manipulation. My grades were excellent, my relationships with classmates and faculty were positive, and my future career prospects were bright. Madison visited me at school during spring break, and I was amazed by the positive changes in her personality and outlook. She had completed her first semester of community college with honest grades, maintained steady employment, and developed realistic career goals based on her actual interests and abilities rather than our parents' social ambitions. We spent hours talking about our childhood and adolescence, finally able to discuss honestly the psychological damage our parents had inflicted on both of us in different ways. Madison's victimization, through overprotection and false praise, had been just as harmful as my victimization through neglect and sabotage. The experience taught me that family isn't defined by blood relationships or legal obligations, but by mutual love, respect, and support. The people who truly cared about my well-being had proven themselves through their actions during the crisis, while those who claimed to love me had shown their true priorities when it mattered most. Standing in my medical school dormitory, surrounded by textbooks, and looking forward to clinical rotations, where I would finally begin helping patients, I felt profound gratitude for the strength I had found to protect myself and the courage I had discovered to build a new life based on my own values and dreams. Sometimes the people who claim to protect us are actually the ones holding us back from our true potential. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even with family, and never let anyone else's limitations become your ceiling. The most important lesson I learned was that true family consists of people who celebrate your successes rather than sabotage them, and who want you to become the best version of yourself rather than a version that's convenient for them. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who tried to control or sabotage your dreams? How do you handle relationships with people who claim to love you but consistently undermine your success? Share your experiences in the comments, because your story might help someone else recognize toxic patterns in their own family relationships. If this story resonated with you about the importance of trusting your instincts and protecting your future, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family manipulation and finding the courage to pursue your dreams. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the power of setting healthy boundaries, even with family members. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that you deserve relationships built on genuine love and support rather than control and manipulation. Wishing you the wisdom to recognize your true worth and the strength to protect your dreams from anyone who tries to diminish them.